Hi, everyone. We are live here on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube,
Everywhere.
all of the channels. So we're just going to give everyone a minute to get settled in here. So I just want to say hello, and we'll just give it a second here so that people can settle in, and we'll go ahead and get started. We're just getting started on LinkedIn. Welcome, everyone. LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, all the places. Oh, and I think we are lucky enough to have all
Oh,
three of us. Yeah.
yay.
Hey, you're
Hi.
just right on time. We are just getting started. We're giving everyone a minute or two to kind of just get settled in. So, hi, everyone. We are live on LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, all of the places. And so I've never done a 3-person live on Instagram. So this will be a first for me, but it looks like it's working. So, but we'll go ahead and get started here shortly. So everyone go ahead and settle in if you're here. Hopefully you have a little evening tea, depending on where you are coming in from the US or abroad. And we'll go ahead and get started. So thanks everybody for joining us. My name is Lillian Emlet. I'm the founder for Transforming Healthcare Coaching. And this is a LinkedIn Live webinar podcast recording with Dr. Reem Al Brahim. She's the Director of Operations at the Physician Transformation Institute. And she has a background in obviously medicine, public health, and she is overseeing the integration of AI and the Aura Code and a bunch of different other leadership programs at the Physician Transformation Institute. And we are lucky enough to also have Dr. Cheng Ruan, who is the founder of the Physician Transformation Institute, CEO of the Texas Center for Lifestyle Medicine, author, AI medicine innovator, and also a semi-retired physician, I think. So I just want to, I guess, say hello to both of you. I don't know if you want to say hello, Cheng, and then Reem.
Yeah, hello everybody. It's awesome to be here. Yeah.
Yeah. Hi. Thank you for having us.
Great. So I guess, our audience is pretty much going to be, people in healthcare, clinicians, leaders, healthcare professionals of all different professions and disciplines. And everyone, really carries a quiet disconnect between the identity they've trained to become and the work they really do day to day. And so we're really hoping for our conversation today as we talk about how the Physician Transformation Institute and Transforming Healthcare Coaching, we both have a desire to make healthcare different for the people that work in it. And so I'm hoping this conversation just be casual, informal, and hopefully inspire people to think about how we all might have a way to change healthcare for the better. So before we get into the work that you're both doing with your institute, what's one word that describes where you were as a physician before you found your way into the transformation work? And then, like, that was the old you. What word would describe that? And then what's one word for where you are now? Like, what's the place that you're bringing now?
Me first. I would say fragmented
Hmm.
because I was trying to fit in and giving pieces of myself that doesn't like I don't feel like I was fitting in. And now I think integration. I integrated. So yeah.
So beautiful. Cheng?
Man, I was like, can I go third? All right.
Oh,
I'm kidding. Wow, that's a powerful and probably emotional one.
Mm-hmm.
I would say like one word would be exhausting
mm.
as a physician, and now is introspective. Yeah, there we go.
Mm.
Ooh, interesting. Interesting.
Mhm.
I think for me, I would say probably, I don't know how to describe like the rat race, sort of just like you're just doing the things how you're just supposed to just be doing. And then now for me, I'm just excited, like excited to get to do the things that light me up. I guess that's what maybe turning 50 does that for you. You're just like, it's like life is too short. I'm just gonna do what I want to do.
Yeah, kick ass. Totally, totally.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about the Physician Transformation Institute. It describes itself as being for doctors who are meant for more. And so, Chang, what made you realize that for yourself in terms of, starting the institute? And then we'll turn it over to Reem.
Wow. So here's the origin story. Never been told. I guess I'll tell it publicly now. So, in when I was training and being a physician, especially in residency, I think the one thing that made me understand myself a lot more is the fact that I always tend to ask higher quality questions that kind of piss people off. you know, there's always sort of a why behind everything that I do. So, and a lot of my personality is that okay, well, this is a standard of care, but why is this a standard of care, right?
Right.
And I realized after residency, during residency it was great because it was a lot of fun. But after residency, it got lonely, is because like challenging something requires a different level of conversation with people. Then I started realizing that the way that we progress in life is purely relational, meaning that like the relationships that we build determines our quality of life, not just with patients, but with staff, medical assistants, administrative personnel. So started my training in relational practices, but I realized they don't teach that in medicine.
Mm.
So I did what any 20-something-year-old kid will do after residency, went into training with Tony Robbins organizations, and ultimately did a lot of different other trainings, anywhere from special forces, military, all the way into PTSD focus groups, right? And I started realizing that like everyone is actually trained on embodying the relationship between people. But in healthcare, it's almost like the opposite, where I taught to kind of ignore that and say, hey, this is what you are for the patient, and that's it, right? So there's this term in healthcare that's not in any other field that I know. It's called compliance. It's my least favorite C word, right? How compliant is this patient, right?
Mm.
So it is triggering, is because compliance has to do with influence, and influence has to do with communication. So the way that we're taught in medicine is to deliver information, and then as a prescriptive authority, has nothing to do with empowering the actual patient. Because if you learn about communication in all other fields, like it's not how it works.
Mhm.
So my sister and I both understood this very early on. So she's a physician too, radiology. And we decided to start Physician Transformation Institute because when I was doing coaching in my business development and private practice groups, and I coached a lot of different practices on operations management, finances, stuff like that. We had two of my really successful people. They did really well, you know. They exited their practice. I mean, one sold for 27 million, the other one sold for $14 million, and then shortly after their quote unquote success, both of them committed suicide. And so I'm like, what's missing? And it's because what happened is money doesn't guarantee happiness, um, unless we become like a lot more introspective, and that's the whole premise of the Physical Transformation Institute. Is let's talk about things that I wish I talked about before, but let's now let's kind of keep it open as a normalcy to discuss, right? And then I met Reem, and she's all about that. So
Yeah.
over to Reem for the follow-up part. Yeah.
Um, well, I met Dr. Chang, and he told me about the Physician Transformation Institute. And for the first time, I feel like there is people like me who are physicians. It's not about giving more. It's about just introspective, as Dr. Chang said, and giving the physician the right to be burnout, or like the right to be to ask for training, or to say we didn't get trained in that, we can't do this, we need coaching. So I feel I have a community, I have a tribe, because I wasn't alone. I figured out I wasn't alone after 10 years.
Mhm.
That's really nice, to think about the fact that investing in yourself. And I will tell you, that starting transforming healthcare coaching, when we spoke directly to clinicians, many clinicians really didn't feel they deserved coaching. It's a really a very sad and very interesting thing. I've been to different Tony Robbins programs, Chang. So I can totally relate. So much of the initial inertia, activation energy, right? Like in terms of even having to believe whether or not you are meant for more, and how can everything truly be integrated. And it's not all cognitive. I think when I heard you talk about the very beginnings, it is that sort of disconnect of like so much of a cerebral learning and actions without necessarily full embodiment of being integrated with our own self leadership and also self desire and actualization.
Yeah. I think there was also a bit of a selection bias because we self-select to be in this field for some level of purpose, and similar to see people go into special forces for a specific story that's in the head, and we have our specific stories. And similar to the military, a lot of times they go in and they're like, oh, this is not necessarily what I signed up for. And similar in the healthcare field, right? And talking with doctors and nurses and PAs and MPs, like there's this discomfort that's there. That's not everybody, but that's enough people to turn heads, right? And then Reem's husband is a dentist, and then we got to talk to the dental field. That's a whole other traumatic field too. And so what I really understood is that, like, if you look at real estate, if you look at legal, if you look at engineering, if you look at all these other industries, they have actually cohorts and support groups that are in there for a specific purpose that's really absent in healthcare. And it's because if there's any omitting to any, whether it's mental health problems or issues like that, there's a fear of retaliation. That's one of them. But if you look at the surveys that's sent out by Medscape, a lot of people we don't really necessarily trust our fields, right? So if I as a doctor have a mental health issue, do I really trust like the mental health organizations in my field to take care of that? And as it turns out, there's less than a 4% trust in our own organizations to take care of it, because we've seen sort of the other side, right? So that's one thing. The second thing is I think it's a belief system, and this may be a limiting belief that oh, maybe I don't deserve this, maybe I'm not worthy, maybe I feel guilty, right? Or maybe I do deserve it, but because other people don't feel I deserve it, I must not deserve it. So there's a lot of like self-talk. And I'm neuro, so in neuro we call it the DMN, the default mode network, which is the frontal lobe all the way towards the longitudinal fissures back. And the default mode network is that self-talk that's always like telling us a story. We wake up every day with a story. So what ends up in healthcare is that everyone wakes up with like one statement that they subconsciously have ingrained in their head. That's what they wake up with. And that becomes like their identity. So we shot a documentary over 2 years, all right? It's on our YouTube channel called The Soul of Medicine. That's actually on our website too, embedded. And it's an 8-part docuseries, but we go through like what happened to the actual like soul of medicine. Because not too long ago, like, healthcare people were seen as like the shamanic leaders of a tribe, some sort of direction, right? But a lot of that has been kind of reduced and marginalized to position of a provider. Right? I'm being with a prescription or a surgery, something like that, right? So now there's a big disconnect between a provider and a clinician. They're not. I don't think they're even the same category anymore. Right? And so, and we all know this deep inside. Like, we don't necessarily say it out loud, but we all kind of know this. And so, part of the Physician Transformation Institute is take all the best of other fields and what they're already doing, and how do we translate that into the healthcare arena, right? So other fields they're doing disc profiles and enneagrams, and Big 5 personalities, and then now we have the Aura Code, which is basically our version of it, but specific for healthcare. Other people are having groups and they talk about things like anonymous groups that talk about like burnout and spirituality. Cool. We got it now in PTI, right? And other people are doing retreats. We do retreats, our upcoming ones in Jamaica. Other people are having focus groups surrounding certain topics that come up that people aren't afraid to really talk about. Now we have our circles as well. And then other people are in groups of curiosity. Hey, what if, you know, now that AI is here, what if this and what if that? Like all the people in the conversations surrounding AI at the biggest conference in the world in health. It's HLTH, is the
Right.
conference, right, in Las Vegas. Like I go there, all the clinicians that are there are mostly like social media influencers and physicians, psychics, and stuff like that. But the discussions around it is the physician's interpretation of what like AI is, but not from an engineer standpoint. So we want to be able to bridge that gap. So we have physician AI engineers, right, that practice plus they do engineering programs and literally develop software. So PTI becomes sort of this open space to discuss anything from the supertentorial engineering side all the way into the deep-seated emotions of trauma. Like it's the whole gamut. But the entire organization is about exploration. But it's the one word for the organization is exploration. Yeah.
I love that. As I think it may have been Tony that may have said this actually, that if you're not learning and growing, you're dying, right? So I
That's
think,
very true.
yeah. So the reality is, I think in general, we often forget that to find the joy in learning and growing. And so what I'm hearing you say is that
Yeah.
at the Physician Transformation Institute, everyone's in their own unique journey, because everyone's and I actually would say that everyone's burnout is also very unique. The reasons for that are very individualized, which is why most generalized well-being programs aren't really sufficient, either from an organizational systemic perspective or in an individual perspective, because each person is so unique. So what I'm hearing you say is that at PTI you have different pathways and different opportunities for different individuals to prevent and heal from that process.
Well, I would say this, and this is not a Tony thing. This is me as a Buddhist. I have a firm belief that everyone's already perfect the way they are. Healing is a construct, and the term like grow is very westernized. So we have this concept that we're so focused on leveling up, certification, degrees, that we forget that leveling up has nothing to do with leveling up in terms of an identity that your degree is manifested off of.
Mhm.
It has to do with leveling up internally. So you have to go internal. So now we use the word, hey, let's level in, because leveling in is the only way you can level up. You can level up all day long, right? And then you get super burnt out by it. And then you can level in and actually change the identity. So you're right earlier is that, hey, if you don't grow, you die. Perhaps death comes first. And it's called death of an ego. It's a very non-dual philosophical term in Buddhism and Hinduism, right?
Right.
And so the death of an ego is like the ego is what creates this perceived identity. So if let's say my identity is one today of being a doctor provider, but let me shift my identity tomorrow, because the word doctor comes from the Latin word docere, which is to teach, an educator or scholar. Let me like scholar myself, right? That's the whole point. That's why I do my social media, is I teach on social media, but me being on social media is my doctor's scholar identity, which I have a higher identification for than the prescriber of prescription pad identity, right? And so at Physician Transformation Institute, no matter what you've been through, we see you as perfect the way you are. I mean, there's absolute unconditional love, right?
Yeah.
And you're welcome to express emotion and do whatever, but there's no judgment. And I feel like that's a sacred place that's really missing in the healthcare field.
Yeah. It's funny because I think also as coaches in general, we often remind our clients that you actually have all the answers within you already. Because a lot of times I do find that people just think, oh, I'll get another MBA, I'll get another degree. And they find there's some kind of maybe holy grail within some kind of information. But I think AI be the first, with the advent of this technology taking off the way it is, to identify knowledge is the only currency really isn't the way to go. And that there are actually much more different ways of knowing is what you're suggesting.
Yeah. And I think we've reached the point where application is the higher currency than knowledge now. I
Right.
think I think we're there. It's scary.
Yes.
Yep, yep,
Yes. Yeah.
yes.
Uh,
It is interesting though, because I do think that, when I think about growth mindset versus fixed mindset, right? So I think, when you think about learning and growing from a fixed mindset perspective, it is about that leveling up concept.
Mhm.
But I think for those who are process oriented, where it's just the process is enough, and the intrinsic value of the moment is enough, that is one protective factor towards the burnout in the system. So I
yeah,
guess, the hardest thing I think about transformation for physicians isn't necessarily the knowing what to do, like you're alluding to, it's the actions. So if the system actively discourages a clinician from owning the process, because we hear this all the time, right? That like it's the system's fault. Where do you help people who have this mindset about it's the system's fault, and what kinds of support structures do you provide in PTI to help people realize they have what they need right there inside them and they are whole and can find the way forward? I'm curious. I don't know, Reem, if you want to go first.
So I believe the system has a big impact, but at the same time, I can't blame physicians all the time about how they feel, because the system made them feel this way, like that they can't talk, they can't express that. As a physician, I've been told, why are you sick? You're a physician. Like, they treat us
yeah,
as robots, not as humans. So it's a big thing, but we work on a personal level. So we surround them with the best community. As Dr. Chang says, it's very safe place. Like, I've seen physicians cried. I've cried in front of people that I met the first time, and I'm not a crier. Like, I don't know how to express my feelings. So we work on a personal level. You get, as Dr. Cheng said, level and introspect. We do a lot of different activities. We do training. And then for the system, there is like, the system has to be trained or like organized in a way they support the
hmm
physicians, the healthcare professionals, and treat them as people who get burnout, sick, get miscommunicated, or not as robots. I think that the main thing that hurts, that even if you're depressed as a physician, like, you're scared to say that,
Mm-hmm.
you know
yeah. Um, I Reem also comes from a very introspective mode because Reem's trained in hypnotherapy, by the way.
oh
So
yeah, yeah,
so we come from sort of that world of understanding that a lot of our identity is based on our perceived reality, right?
yes.
Let's put it this way. So we have two ways to looking at things. We can say that the system is the enemy and that has created this, right? So if I have that as a fundamental belief construct in my head, I never would have created physician transformations to be like, oh, the system's the way it is, right?
Hmm.
Right.
But to get to the mindset of creating this is the system is the reality in which we live and how we're perceiving the reality. So there's this thing that came up. So we just did a training with a university large hospital system here in Houston, and they want to talk about moral injury. I'm like, all right, moral injury, and the term means that one observes something that they feel powerless to do and doesn't think is necessarily right, right?
Right.
And so moral injury is a typical, it's like system blaming thing that actually happened. Maybe they see something with a patient, it's not right. Or maybe they're like, you know what, I could give so much for the patient, but they've triple booked my schedule for the morning because we have a lot of cancellations and people are not met their deductibles, et cetera, right? So that becomes a system thing. And so, but one of the things I talk about is that the system is based on communication also. So, I recognize pattern as a pattern recognizer. The same reasons why we're burnt out as healthcare professionals, the same reason why administrators are also burnt out. It's actually no difference. It's because the way that the communication is in administration doesn't support quality like company culture. And the company culture's definition is like what there's five different levels of company culture. Level one, and this is written in a book, beautiful book, by Dr. Haley Fisher Wright, who was the old CEO for MGMA. And her as a physician is like, here's the five different levels, right? Level one is she calls it the we suck level. Is you come into the hospital, it's we suck. Like I will never send my family here, you know.
Okay.
And that's about 50% of organizations in the United States. Okay, and then level two is is we don't suck. Is my employees suck, but I don't suck, which is level four. That's a majority of the organizations, healthcare organizations in the United States, right?
Okay.
Level three is I don't suck. The organization doesn't suck, but like something is not right, and it's really static. It feels like really stuffy,
Hmm.
and then there's no like movement to going forward, right? And then level four is that we're amazing and everyone else sucks, okay? Which is arguably just as toxic. And then level five is everyone is perfect. We're going the right way, and this is what we want to do. And we're talking about under 2% of the health organizations in the level five. It's more community and collaborative, right? Where we see most of the level four and five, actually, most of the level five organizations are organizations that are faith based, okay? And faith based organizations are actually really amazing because they really cater to mental health as a primary agent of change whenever there's issues that really come up, right?
Yeah.
So if we take the components of those, what are they teaching? They're teaching unconditional love. They're having like spaces for people to come and talk, right? And it's not one particular faith. We have Catholic systems, we have Jewish systems, we have all sorts of different systems that are there, right? But the faith-based organizations tend to do really well, right? And it's really fun to watch the interaction because it reminds you of other healthcare systems. So now let's say that hey, if I want to be a level five organization and I've never experienced level five organizations, all I'm going to say is the system sucks and nothing I can do about it, right? But if I know a level five organization, what it looks like, hey, let's go check it out. Let's see how it is over here, right? And so what happens is a diamond can only be crafted after a volcanic eruption because diamonds are made in the mantle of the earth. So you have to sift through the ashes. Like, let's go through the ashes and actually find the diamond. That's what finding organizations are like, right?
Right.
And I think that because I have a model to go after, because I used to consult for all these organizations, right? That I have, there's a comparison that's there. So once again, we're met with a bias, and our bias is like whatever situations that we're in, like that's the only reality that we know. It's kind of like the frog in the well, right? The sky is only this small, it's a circle, you know?
Right.
And so part of PTI is like, let's jump out the well. You know, it's scary at first. It's super scary, but let's experience the sky. Yeah.
Right. I like that. I do also think the reality is, a lot of people do rage against the system.
Yeah.
And as much as, Reem, as you're saying that the reality is the system creates that reality and this is what people believe.
Yeah.
I also do feel that, to be the diamond amidst,
Yes.
diamonds in development, everyone's a diamond in development.
Mhm.
And so I think for us, when we started transforming healthcare coaching, I really felt that every single one person, the more one people you can actually change, the more teams you can change, you could actually create more diamonds in development, like you're describing, that it is possible because the culture is not made of this imaginary ethereal system. It's actually made by the people who tolerate, and the people who continue to gaslight, or the people who don't recognize that this is a bad policy and we need to change it for maternal health, for time, for breaks, for extra staffing, really is a lot of it has relates to the schedule and the agency people have within their work groups to be able to do something different, to pilot ways to change things. And I think that's where when people lose their voice and their ideas are never heard, or there's no process to pilot something new every year to be able to improve the stability of the group. Because life is life. We're all going to get sick at some point. We've all dealt with death in our own families. We've all gotten through the pandemic. If there's nothing that the pandemic has taught us, is like how stressful being a human is.
Oh my goodness.
Leaders who don't recognize the lessons from the pandemic and now try to continuously improve. I do think that's some of the most worrisome things I'm seeing 5 years afterwards, is that we're sort of reverting back to some of our worst old habits rather than reflecting and really deeply integrating some of the good things that came out of the pandemic as well.
Hmm. Yeah, I also think that the elephant in the room is money. A lot of
Mhm.
Mhm.
healthcare
Yes.
professionals are terrified of the word and have a lot of guilt that's surrounding it. Um, but it is my daily word because in order for us to change the systems, I have to know how the money flows. Like who's funding these groups, right? Where's it going to come from, right? And for example, I knew in our last meeting that we were talking to a hospital system that's a nonprofit organization. So I also know because I own a nonprofit, there are grants associated with this. So
Mhm.
speaking with them, let's go apply for a grant. This is where the money goes, right? And everything is fueled by money, and we have to be comfortable with talking about it. That's the first part, and the second part is we have to be comfortable with making money. All right, that's really important.
I think it's hard for physicians to feel this way.
Yeah, yeah. All clinicians, I think, it's hard to
Yeah.
feel this way because we kind of serve this purpose, right?
Mhm.
But money is an energy exchange. You know, it's the mana, it's the
Mhm.
chakras, it's the chi. Like, it literally moves everything, right? And so, like, a part of our organization is that, like, we also train people on like money and flow. And if you don't have money, like, being a physician and being a clinician is a business. Okay, and so a lot of people get caught up in, oh, this isn't right. But the minute you talk about, oh, where's the money going to come to supply this, it's almost like a free state. You know, I don't want to talk about this. That's
Right.
not for me to deal with. Well, if we as clinicians don't dominate the money flow part, then there's actually no dominance of it, right? And it's not everyone's role to worry about it, but I would say it's my role to worry about it. It's also my role to understand that a dollar allocated to this is super wasteful, but a dollar allocated to this bucket saves money in the long run, right? If you lose one physician in an organization,
Mhm.
it's a $2 million loss, all right, from an organization, one physician, okay?
Right.
And so $2 million, well, okay, so like where's that going? So it's the unrealized revenue plus it's the value that lifetime value of a customer, LTV, which is one of the numbers we always look at from a business planning perspective, right? And so, like, now if I go into a boardroom and say, hey, like, you guys lost 11 positions here to replace two, right? And what do you think your customer acquisition costs for the hospital is? What do you think the LTV is for them not being on board anymore? And what do you think is the churn rate for the actual patients, right? If I go into a boardroom and say that first, they're going to listen to me. And then I can say, hey, let's talk about physician well-being because that's going to be costing you money right now, right? And
Mhm.
here's actual money that's actually costing you. I can calculate it. I can look at the national benchmark and stuff like that, right? And so now I'm able to do that because I'm training it. But like, even if you're an employee physician, people are like so scared of asking for contract negotiations, right? And if they do, they're like under they're under asking. And a lot of doctors are not understanding their own worth. You know, there's a situation where there's a doctor that left an organization and a year later they offer her almost twice as much for doing 1 day less work. Is because I understood the capital that they have lost, and then I went back and think, hey, like tell me about this, and is this number adequate for you, right? You got lost $2.1 million because this physician left, right? And so why not give the salary at $620,000 instead of 300? And then they said like, well, this is not the standard. Like, who cares about the standard? I just told you you lost $1 million, all right, over this last year. Like, what is really that worth for you, and how much are you gonna pay to get that physician back? Because that physician also was the core of the company culture in the organization, right? So like these are the things that we have to be able to like advocate for ourselves, right? To understand like truly at the core, like our value, our worth from financial to spiritual perspective. It's all very holistic.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's always interesting to also to watch the interplay between the hospital-based specialties that are very intertwined with each other compared to the outpatient. I think the outpatient realm has a lot more potential options.
Mm.
Direct primary care, concierge medicine, private
Oh, totally.
practice. They
Yeah.
actually have options as compared to some of the hospital-based specialties like myself. The reality is they're intertwined with different politics and different issues of different specialties, and therefore can be even more complicated to disentangle from in general.
Yeah. Inpatient is a lot more complicated. It's very true.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, right. Right, right.
Yeah.
And so we've talked, quite a bit about all the different things that are out there, and I think if a physician is listening right now, nodding along, okay, they get it, they feel the gap, they also understand that they can now see themselves, maybe I want to do something different. And they're exhausted just by doing it all by themselves, just trying. They're always just sort of they're feeling they're swimming in the wrong direction,
Mhm.
where the rest of the world is like going one direction and they're going the opposite. So what for both Reem and Cheng, what would you say? What would be the first concrete step a physician to own their own transformation process? What would be the first thing, one small thing that they could do?
For me, I would say they have to be authentic to themselves, like be honest with themselves and try to change themselves first so their environment can change. So take the step forward. If you don't like it, take the step forward and like change from yourself, and then the opportunities and life would open the doors for you.
And I would say even a tiny, tiny little step is go to physiciantransformationinstitute.com. At the very top, it says join our newsletter for updates because we're about to unleash a beast of different things that are there. And I think that whenever we're organizing anything from our retreat in Jamaica to everything, there's a lot of thought that's kind of put into it. Or we kind of enter this new era now that we've hit a critical mass. We've entered a new era of we can actually do a lot right now. We've gotten an amazing grant recently, so we're about to unleash amazing things, partnering with very large organizations, health tech organizations in the country. So these conversations could be had. Another small thing is as Reem was talking about, like recognizing that the self and the reality of the self is what ultimately comes first. But another small thing is something called a key of separation. So we have a 11 key process into introspection. It's our leveling method. So key of separation is to if you're listening to this, sit there and separate. If I'm not a doctor, if I'm not a mother or a husband, if not a son, not a brother, sister, who am I? So what you basically separate your roles and take a deep. And if you find yourself empty, that's an issue. And if you find yourself, oh, I think I know who I am, but I haven't been that person, that's also an issue. So call it the key of separation. That's one of the main things we actually do at a retreat is like separate and then integrate. Yeah.
Awesome. And I think for I would say is find a coach. I always
That's true too.
I always find it sort of surprising that athletes, teams all have an entire
Yeah.
squad behind them. Right, for the Olympics, they
Right.
have a squad behind them, and the reality is physicians really deserve to have at least one person in their corner, someone private, someone different from their partner, someone different from their mentor, their sponsor, their advisor, someone who's just there for them to be the sounding board, to be the supreme athlete that they need to be. So I would say that's my one thing I would recommend people do.
Yeah. Please don't ask your friend to coach you. A coach should be someone that's completely separate from you. You have no idea who you are. Like a coach should also not one that's kind of tied to your outcomes, but they kind of serve sort of the unconditional love leader, right? So I've made that mistake of getting people and even investors as my coach, but there's always sort of an unsubconscious invested unions there. I've paid $500,000 in my life for coaching over a span of my life. And so I've had all sorts of things, high performance coach, therapist, whole nine yards. But it could be as simple as if you're an employed physician, maybe your insurance benefit, like my Blue Cross Blue Shield plan, I get to talk to therapists for free, like once a week. Maybe start there, right? Now, like getting a coach is also important is because the coach's job is to also challenge you. It's not just, okay, they're there, right? hey, I'm going to challenge you on this. What is another reframing way that we can actually look at this? And I look forward to my challenges on a weekly basis when I talk to my coaches. Is they're having me think about things that are very different, and I'm like, oh yeah, like why was I even doing that in the first place? I don't really remember. So my coaching session's tomorrow, so I can't wait to talk to her. So that's my main advice for getting a coach.
Awesome. And so I think my last question is the question I said that I asked for both of you is we like I chose Transforming Healthcare Coaching's name intentionally, as I'm sure you also chose the Physician Transformation Institute's name intentionally. So what does transformation mean to you, and why did you make that part of the name of your company?
Yeah, transformation for me is actually being introspective. I think we're at a booth in the Palliative Care and Hospice Conference, right? The National Palliative Care Board in Arizona. And I had this young fellow come by the table, right? And our booth is kind of fun because we have like pictures of physicians doing crazy stuff together, jumping into waterfalls, like in everything. And then she read our name. It was like a Physician Transformation Institute. She comes and says, "Oh my God, I have to transform more. Like, what do I have to transform anymore?" I'm like, "Oh, let's talk about what that means," right? And so, like, a lot of people think transforming is catering to some sort of system, right? But the true transformation has nothing to do with that. The true transformation is remembering who you are. That's it. The term transformation is remembering who you are. Period. Yeah.
Interesting. And then for me, I think the reason why I chose Transforming Healthcare Coaching was primarily because we can all become something different, something that you can't imagine, something that is even better than what you think it's supposed to be. And so for that, I mean, when we think about like a butterfly, it transforms completely in full body, shape, abilities. And so I think humans have the same capacity and potential. And so that's why I chose that name.
Yeah. I often talk with my patients about like epigenetic expression, right? So, like butterfly is such a great example. Is like there's something that triggers the genome to go into the cocoon, and then cocoon is basically the caterpillar being super introspective for a little while and then spread, right?
Right.
Yeah.
But then, so is a grasshopper and a locust. A locust is the same as a grasshopper, but under stress, it turns in the body changes, the frontal jaw changes, the color changes to yellow, you get striped, right?
Right.
And that only happens in extreme famine. That's why locusts are only during extreme famine, but they're actually grasshoppers, right? Or a pig. A pig in captivity is raised as pink and cute, but in the wild they're boars. But it's the same animal. It's sort of a epigenetic expression. So we see these transformations as the same creature, but they have different stressors and different things that come into life, right?
Yes.
And so part of being introspective is, hey, maybe we've been a caterpillar, or maybe we've been a locust. I don't know. Let's cocoon ourselves introspectively and see what comes out of that, and have some curiosity out of it. Yeah.
I love that. Thank you so much, Cheng and Reem, for being here with us tonight. And so, for everyone who's listening, if today's conversation resonated in that space between who you are currently and who you intend to become, that's what we work on at the Transforming Healthcare Coaching and also at the Physician Transformation Institute. And so, please feel free to contact us, look us up, find us on our YouTube channels, go to our websites, and book a call, find a conversation, get in touch with Reem or Cheng, and find out what programs might resonate for you. Their retreats, our coaching. We also have team coaching for organizations. So thank you so much for listening and being here. And thank you, Reem, and thank you, Cheng, for being here tonight on the live webinar podcast recording.
Yeah,
Thank you so much.
Appreciate
Have
it.
a good night. Thank you.
Thanks. Have a good night, everyone.
Good night.